The lonely CEO couldn't believe his eyes when he found a little girl passed out on his office floor at midnight. But when she opened her eyes and whispered her heartbreaking story, everything changed forever. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The clock on Michael Harrison's mahogany desk showed 2:47 a.m. when he heard it, a soft whimper that made his blood run cold. For 32 years, he'd never heard anything like it in his corner office on the 42nd floor of Harrison Industries. The sound was so out of place in his sterile world of quarterly reports and board meetings that he almost convinced himself he'd imagined it. Michael set down his coffee cup, the ceramic clicking against the glass surface. The whimper came again, weaker this time, from somewhere near his leather couch. His heart hammered against his ribs as he stood, his expensive Italian shoes silent on the Persian rug his mother had chosen for this office before cancer took her 5 years ago. What he found behind his couch shattered every wall he'd built around his heart. A little girl, no more than 7 years old, lay crumpled on the floor like a broken doll. Her blonde hair was matted with dirt and tears, her small body trembling in a faded yellow dress that had seen better days. One tiny hand clutched a raggedy stuffed rabbit missing an ear, while the other pressed against her stomach as if she were trying to hold herself together. "Jesus," Michael whispered, dropping to his knees beside her. The child's skin was pale as moonlight, her lips tinged blue. He'd never touched a child before, had actively avoided them, truth be told, but something primal took over. His hand found her forehead, checking for fever like he'd seen in movies. Her eyes fluttered open then, revealing the most beautiful blue eyes he'd ever seen, wide with terror and exhaustion. They reminded him of his sister Katie's eyes before the accident that took her when she was just 8 years old. "Please don't hurt me," the little girl whispered, her voice barely audible. She tried to scramble away from him, her back pressed against the couch, clutching her stuffed rabbit tighter. Michael's throat constricted. "I'm not going to hurt you, sweetheart, I promise. What's your name?" "Emma," she said, then immediately looked like she regretted giving him that information. "Emma, that's a beautiful name. I'm Michael. Can you tell me how you got here?" He kept his voice as gentle as possible, the same tone he'd used with injured animals as a boy on his grandfather's farm in Tennessee. Emma's lower lip trembled. I was hiding. The mean men were looking for me, and I saw your building had lights on. I just wanted somewhere safe." Fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I'm so hungry, and I'm scared they'll find me." Michael felt something shift inside his chest, like ice cracking in spring. This child, this tiny, brave little girl, had somehow made it past security, past locked doors, into his private sanctuary. She'd been running from someone, and she'd chosen his building as her refuge. "Who's looking for you, Emma?" he asked softly. "Uncle Ray and Aunt Linda," she whispered. They said they're going to sell me to bad people to pay for Uncle Ray's gambling. I heard them talking about it when they thought I was sleeping. They said I'm worth a lot of money because I'm pretty and small." The words hit Michael like a physical blow. His hands clenched into fists before he forced himself to relax. Getting angry wouldn't help this child. But God, the fury that roared through him was unlike anything he'd ever felt. "Emma, listen to me very carefully," he said, leaning closer. "Nobody is going to sell you. Nobody is going to hurt you. I won't let them." For the first time since he'd found her, something like hope flickered in those blue eyes. But as he looked at this broken little angel who'd somehow found her way into his life, Michael Harrison had no idea that saving her would force him to confront the demons he'd been running from his entire adult life, or that the men hunting her were already closer than either of them realized. Michael carried Emma to his private bathroom, her tiny body weighing less than his briefcase, but somehow feeling heavier than any burden he'd ever shouldered. She'd fallen unconscious again, and panic clawed at his throat like a living thing. He'd built an empire worth billions, commanded boardrooms full of sharks who trembled at his signature, negotiated deals that made headlines. But this 7-year-old girl had reduced him to a terrified amateur fumbling in the dark. "Stay with me, Emma," he whispered, his voice cracking in a way it hadn't since he was 17 and watching his sister Katie slip away in that sterile hospital room. He ran warm water over a monogrammed hand towel, testing the temperature twice before touching it to Emma's dirt-stained cheek. As he gently cleaned her face, memories surfaced unbidden. Katie in the hospital, tubes and machines creating a symphony of beeps and whirs. His parents' whispered conversations about things being too late, about if only we'd found her sooner. The drunk driver who'd hit Katie had walked away without a scratch, while his 8-year-old sister fought for her life for 6 agonizing days before losing. Emma's eyes fluttered open as he dabbed at a scrape on her cheek, so gentle his touch was barely perceptible. "You're still here," she said, wonder and disbelief mingling in her voice as if she'd expected to wake up alone, abandoned like so many times before. "I'm not going anywhere," Michael promised, the words surprising him with their conviction. In his corporate world, promises were contracts with escape clauses, carefully worded to avoid liability. This was different. This was a vow carved from something deeper than business acumen. He found crackers in his office kitchenette, stale remnants from some long-forgotten late-night work session, and watched her eat them with the desperate hunger of someone who hadn't had a proper meal in days. Each small bite broke his heart a little more. She held each cracker with both hands, as if it were precious, chewing slowly to make it last. "Emma, sweetheart, how long have you been running?" 3 days, she whispered, crumbs falling from her trembling lips. "Maybe 4. The days got all mixed up." She paused, looking up at him with those devastating blue eyes. "I heard Uncle Ray on the phone with someone. The man said he'd pay $50,000 for me, but only if I was untouched." Her voice broke on the last word, though she clearly didn't understand its full horrifying meaning. Michael's vision went red. $50,000. They were selling this precious child like livestock at auction, and the implications of untouched made him physically sick. His hands clenched into fists before he forced them to relax, reminding himself that anger wouldn't help Emma now. "Where are your real parents, sweetheart?" "Poor. Mommy and Daddy died in a car crash last Christmas," she said matter-of-factly, though her lower lip trembled. "Uncle Ray is Mommy's brother. He said he'd take care of me, but—" She trailed off, clutching her one-eared stuffed rabbit tighter. "But what, Emma? He hits me when he's been drinking. His hand is really big, and it hurts my face. And Aunt Linda says I eat too much and cost too much money for medicine when I get sick. They don't want me." The resignation in her voice was heartbreaking. A child who had already learned she was unwanted. Michael knelt beside her chair, bringing himself to her eye level. "Well, I want you here. You're not too much of anything, Emma. You're exactly right, and I'm going to make sure you're safe." As dawn broke over Chicago, painting his corner office in streams of golden light, Michael realized his perfectly ordered life was about to become beautifully, wonderfully chaotic. But 42 floors below, a black sedan was already parking across from his building, and 2 men in dark coats were studying the building's entrances with professional interest. The first call came at exactly 8:15 a.m., puncturing the peaceful morning like a gunshot. Michael's secretary, Patricia, a steel-haired woman who'd been his guardian angel for 20 years, knocked on his door with an expression he'd rarely seen, genuine concern mixed with protective instinct. "Mr. Harrison, there's a man on the phone asking about a missing child. Says he's the girl's uncle, and he tracked her to this area. His voice—" She paused, choosing her words carefully. "He sounds like trouble, sir, the kind that doesn't take no for an answer. Should I put him through?" Michael felt Emma stiffen beside him on the leather couch, where they'd been reading a picture book Patricia had mysteriously produced from her desk drawer. Something about a brave little mouse who saved her forest friends. The irony wasn't lost on him. "Tell him I'm in meetings all day," Michael said firmly, his CEO voice leaving no room for negotiation. "All week, if necessary." Patricia nodded, understanding the subtext after 2 decades of protecting him from unwanted intrusions. Emma's small hand found his, her fingers ice cold, despite the warm office. "That's Uncle Ray. He found me." Terror filled her voice, making her sound even younger than her 7 years. "No," Michael said with absolute conviction. "He hasn't found you. This building has the best security in Chicago. Military-grade systems, former Special Forces guards, and protocols that keep out everyone I don't want here. And I'm not about to hand you over to anyone, especially not him." But even as he spoke the words with confidence, Michael knew he was swimming in waters far deeper and more dangerous than quarterly earnings reports and hostile takeovers. He was a businessman, not a protector. He had lawyers, not warriors. And he had no legal right to keep Emma, despite every paternal instinct he'd thought died with Katie now screaming at him to never let this child go. The second call came exactly 1 hour later, as if timed for maximum psychological impact. This time, it was Detective Sarah Martinez from the Chicago PD, her voice professional, but carrying an undertone of suspicion. "Mr. Harrison, I need to ask you some questions about a missing child report filed this morning. Emma Williams, age 7, blonde hair, blue eyes. Her legal guardians believe she may have entered your building 3 nights ago." Michael's blood ran cold, but his voice remained steady. A skill learned in countless board meetings where showing weakness meant corporate death. "I see. And what makes them think that, Detective?" "Security cameras across the street caught footage of a small blonde girl entering through your parking garage at approximately 2:30 a.m. The timestamp matches when the child went missing from her home. Mr. Harrison, child endangerment is a serious charge, and obstruction of justice carries significant penalties. If you're harboring this child—" "Nah, Detective Martinez," Michael interrupted, his CEO voice taking full command. "If you have a warrant, please come up and we'll discuss this properly. If not, I suggest you investigate why a 7-year-old child was wandering the streets alone at midnight in the first place. That seems like the more pressing concern." After hanging up, he found Emma crying silently in the corner, tears streaming down her face as she tried to make herself smaller, invisible. "They're going to take me back," she whispered. "They're going to make me go with Victor, and I'll never see you again." Michael crouched down to her level, his expensive suit creasing without a thought. "Emma, look at me. I need you to be brave for just a little longer. I need to know everything, every detail about your uncle and aunt, every conversation you overheard, every person who came to visit. Can you do that for me?" She nodded, wiping her nose with her sleeve, then began to speak in halting whispers. And as her story unfolded, Michael realized that saving Emma Williams might require him to become someone he'd never been before, someone willing to break every law, burn every bridge, and sacrifice everything for love. "His name isn't really Uncle Ray," Emma said, curled up in Michael's massive desk chair that made her look like a doll in a giant's furniture. Her legs didn't even reach the edge of the seat. "I saw his driver's license once when it fell out of his wallet. It says Raymond Carlisle, but Mommy always called him Ray Williams before the accident." Michael made careful notes on his tablet, his fingers flying across the screen. Every detail mattered now. In his business world, information was power, and he was gathering intelligence like his life, and Emma's, depended on it. "What about the man he talked to on the phone? You mentioned Victor." "He called him Victor something Sky. He had a funny accent, like the villains in those spy movies Daddy used to watch." Emma's voice grew smaller. "Victor said he had other buyers if Uncle Ray was having second thoughts, but that little blonde girls like me were special orders." Her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said I was exactly what his clients requested. What does that mean, Michael? Michael's jaw clenched so hard he felt his teeth might crack. He knew exactly what it meant, had read enough FBI reports during his company's security consultations to understand the sick world Emma had narrowly escaped. It made him want to hunt down this Victor and Ray with his bare hands and show them what happened to monsters who targeted children. It means you were incredibly smart and brave to run away, he said carefully, fighting to keep the rage out of his voice. And it means we're going to make sure you never have to go back. Patricia knocked and entered with lunch. Sandwiches cut into perfect triangles with crusts removed, apple slices arranged like flower petals, and chocolate milk in a crystal glass that probably cost more than most people's weekly groceries. She'd been quietly helping all morning, asking no questions, but providing everything Emma needed with the efficiency of someone who understood children despite never having any of her own. Mr. Harrison, Patricia said quietly, her voice carrying 20 years of reading situations and people. There are 2 men in the lobby asking our security team detailed questions about building access, fire exits, and employee schedules. They claim to be from the city inspector's office, but they don't have proper identification, and they're wearing expensive watches that city employees can't afford. Through his floor-to-ceiling windows, Michael could see the black sedan still parked across the street, joined now by a white panel van with tinted windows. They were being watched by professionals, and the net was tightening. Emma, I need to make some very important phone calls. Will you be okay here with Patricia for a little while? Emma nodded, though fear flickered in her eyes like candle flames in wind. You're coming back, right? You promise you won't leave me like everyone else did. The trust in her voice nearly broke him. I promise, sweetheart. I've never broken a promise in my life, and I'm not starting now. In his private conference room, soundproof, encrypted, swept daily for surveillance devices, Michael made 3 calls that would change the trajectory of his entire existence. First, to his head of security, Jim Crawford, a former Marine Force recon operative who owed Michael his life after Michael had quietly paid for his daughter's experimental cancer treatment when the insurance companies refused coverage. Second, to his personal attorney Thomas Kellerman, not his corporate legal team, but the defense lawyer he kept on expensive retainer for situations that required creative interpretations of law and morality. Third, to a private investigator named Marcus Stone, a man who specialized in cases others wouldn't touch and operated in shadows most people pretended didn't exist. When he returned to his office 20 minutes later, Emma was asleep on his couch, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her chin, looking peaceful for the first time since he'd found her. Patricia had covered her with a cashmere throw blanket that probably cost more than most cars. She's been through hell, Patricia whispered, maternal instincts evident despite her professional exterior. Not anymore, Michael said with quiet determination. But even as he spoke, his secure phone rang with a number he didn't recognize, the caller ID showing only blocked digits. Michael Harrison. Mr. Harrison, this is Victor Kozlov. I believe you have something that belongs to my business associates, and I think it's time we discuss terms. The voice on the phone was cultured, precise, with the kind of educated Eastern European accent that spoke of expensive schools and sophisticated tastes. It sent chills down Michael's spine like ice water through his veins. This wasn't some street-level thug. This was something far more dangerous. I think you have the wrong number, Michael said calmly, though his free hand instinctively moved to shield Emma's sleeping form from view, as if Victor could see through the phone line. Please, Mr. Harrison, we both know you're an intelligent man, brilliant even. Your business acumen is legendary. The child has been missing for 3 days. Security footage shows her entering your building. My associates have confirmed she hasn't left. Simple mathematics, really. Michael walked to his windows, scanning the street below with new eyes. The black sedan was gone, but the white van remained, now accompanied by a motorcycle, with a rider who never removed his helmet. They were being watched by a coordinated team. Even if that were true, which I'm neither confirming nor denying, what makes you think I'd hand over a child to complete strangers? Victor's laugh was like crystal breaking on marble, beautiful and utterly chilling, because the alternative would be unpleasant. For you, for your business empire, for everyone you've ever cared about, I have extensive resources, Mr. Harrison, international connections, your company's stock price, your personal safety, your reputation, the safety of your employees, all can be dramatically affected by a single phone call to the right people. Michael's mind raced through possibilities, calculating risks the way he'd learned to do in 20 years of corporate warfare. But this wasn't about market shares and profit margins anymore. Is that a threat, Mr. Kozlov? It's a business proposition. Return the merchandise undamaged within 24 hours, and this conversation never happened. You continue your profitable existence, I continue mine, and everyone wins. Refuse, and you'll discover that even billionaires aren't untouchable when they interfere with established business relationships. Every instinct Michael had developed in 3 decades of corporate battles told him to negotiate, to find middle ground, to make the smart business decision that would minimize risk and maximize survival. The old Michael, the one who had built Harrison Industries from nothing, would have calculated the odds and chosen self-preservation. But that Michael had died the moment he'd found a terrified little girl hiding behind his couch. "Go to hell," Michael said with quiet venom, and hung up. Emma was awake, staring at him with those impossibly perceptive blue eyes. That was the bad man Victor, wasn't it? How did you? I know that scared voice. You used it just like Uncle Ray did when Victor would call and make demands. She sat up, clutching her rabbit tighter. They're not going to stop looking for me, are they? Michael knelt beside the couch, taking her small hands in his much larger ones. Emma, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm going to keep you safe, but we might have to go away for a while. Somewhere far from here. Would that be okay with you? Away where? Somewhere they can't find us. Somewhere you can be a little girl instead of being afraid all the time. But first, I need to know. Is there anything else you haven't told me about your uncle or Victor? Any detail, no matter how small? Emma bit her lower lip, thinking hard with the concentration of someone far older than her years. There was a book. Uncle Ray kept it hidden in his bedroom closet behind the old shoeboxes. It had pictures and names and phone numbers. When Victor would call, Uncle Ray would always get the book out and look through it while they talked. What kind of pictures, sweetheart? Emma's face crumpled with remembered horror. Pictures of kids, lots of kids, all different ages. Some looked happy, but most looked really, really sad and scared. Like they were crying, but trying to hide it. She paused, wiping her nose, and there were grown-up names written under each picture, with numbers that looked like prices. Michael's blood turned to ice. This wasn't just about Emma anymore. This was about dozens of children, maybe hundreds, all catalogued like inventory in some sick marketplace. His secure phone buzzed with an incoming text message. A photo appeared on the screen, his building, taken from across the street with a high-powered lens, with crosshairs digitally superimposed over his office windows. The message was simple, direct, and terrifying. 24 hours. Don't make this harder than necessary. Michael stared at the threatening photo until his hands shook, the image burning itself into his retinas. 24 hours. Then what? Would they storm his building with military precision, hurt Patricia and his other employees? Or would they simply make him and Emma disappear like so many others who had dared to cross organized predators with international reach? "We're leaving," he announced, scooping up Emma and her one-eared rabbit in one fluid motion. "Right now." "Where are we going?" Emma asked as Michael quickly stuffed critical documents into his briefcase with the efficiency of someone who'd learned to pack for unexpected business trips, though this was far from business. "My cabin in the Colorado mountains. It's completely off the grid. No cell towers, no internet, no way for them to track us electronically. I bought it years ago as a retreat, but never had time to use it." He paused, looking at this incredibly brave little girl who had turned his carefully ordered world completely upside down. "Emma, what I'm about to do, it might mean I can never come back to this life, this office, this company. I might lose everything I've built. Are you absolutely sure you want me to keep helping you?" Emma's answer came without a moment's hesitation, spoken with the gravity of someone far beyond her 7 years. "You're the first grown-up who ever asked me what I wanted, instead of just telling me what I had to do. Please don't leave me. I'll be good, I promise. I won't eat too much or cost too much money." The heartbreaking earnestness in her voice nearly destroyed him. This child had been conditioned to believe she was a burden, that her very existence was an inconvenience to be tolerated rather than a gift to be cherished. Patricia appeared in the doorway as if summoned by some sixth sense, carrying a small overnight bag. "Mr. Harrison, Mr. Crawford is waiting with the armored car in underground parking level B3. He's mapped 3 different exit routes, and he says you have maybe 8 minutes before they figure out the pattern and move to intercept." Michael grabbed Emma's hand, surprised by how naturally his fingers entwined with her tiny ones. "Patricia, you need to disappear for a while. Take that vacation to visit your sister in Miami you've been putting off. Today, this afternoon. And you already booked the flight," she said, with a knowing smile that spoke of decades spent anticipating her boss's needs. "Mr. Harrison, that little girl is the luckiest child in the world to have found you. And you're pretty lucky too." As they rushed toward the private elevator, Michael's encrypted tablet chimed with a priority message from Marcus Stone. "Found more than just the book. You're not going to believe what's in these files. International trafficking ring, government connections, law enforcement corruption. Call me when you're secure. And Harrison, you just declared war on people who make the mob look like choir boys." The elevator doors closed with a soft whisper, and Michael watched the floor numbers descend like a countdown to his old life's end. In 32 years, he'd never run from anything. He'd built his empire by facing problems head-on, by being smarter, tougher, and more ruthless than anyone who opposed him. But Emma wasn't a business problem to solve with market strategies and calculated risks. She was a little girl who deserved better than the monsters hunting her, and protecting her meant becoming someone entirely different from the corporate shark he'd trained himself to be. "Michael?" Emma's small voice cut through his thoughts like a lifeline. "Are you scared?" He looked down at her. This tiny warrior who had already survived more horror than most adults ever would, who had somehow found the courage to run into the night rather than submit to unthinkable fate. "Terrified," he admitted, finding unexpected relief in honesty. "But sometimes being scared means you're doing something important." Emma nodded solemnly, squeezing his hand with surprising strength. "Daddy used to say that brave isn't about not being scared. Brave is being scared and doing the right thing anyway." As they reached the parking level, where Jim Crawford waited beside a black SUV with bulletproof glass and reinforced steel, Michael realized that Emma wasn't the only one who needed saving. For the first time in 20 years, since Katie's death had turned him into an emotional fortress designed to keep everyone at safe distance, he was letting someone matter again. And that, he was beginning to understand, was both the most dangerous and the most important thing he'd ever done. The cabin materialized from the Colorado wilderness like something from a fairy tale Emma might have read with her parents before the accident. Nestled between towering pines and overlooking a crystal-clear lake that reflected the mountains like a mirror, it was everything Michael's sterile corporate world wasn't. Warm, welcoming, alive. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, pressing her face against the SUV's bulletproof window. For the first time in days, wonder replaced fear in her voice. "It looks like where Goldilocks would want to live, but without the scary bears." Michael smiled, the first genuine smile he'd felt in years. "There might actually be bears, sweetheart. But they're more afraid of us than we are of them." Jim Crawford, his security chief, had driven them through the night using back roads and mountain passes that didn't exist on GPS systems. The ex-Marine had barely spoken during the 8-hour journey, but his constant vigilance and the way his hand never strayed far from his concealed weapon spoke volumes about the danger they'd left behind in Chicago. "Perimeter's secure," Jim reported as he parked beside the cabin. "Motion sensors, cameras, early warning systems. If anything bigger than a squirrel approaches, we'll know about it. Cell phone jamming equipment is active within a 2-mile radius, so they can't track us electronically." Inside, the cabin was nothing like Michael's minimalist corporate aesthetic. Hand-hewn log walls, a massive stone fireplace, furniture that invited you to curl up with a good book. Emma's eyes went wide as she explored, touching everything with the reverence of someone who'd never been allowed to feel truly safe. "This room can be yours," Michael said, opening the door to what had been intended as a guest bedroom. Sunlight streamed through windows that looked out over the lake, and there was even a window seat, with cushions perfect for reading. "Mine." Emma's voice was small, disbelieving. "Like, really mine? I don't have to share it or leave if someone needs the space?" The question broke Michael's heart all over again. "Really yours, for as long as you want it." That evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Emma curled up in an oversized chair with her rabbit, Michael pretending to read financial reports while actually watching her relax for the first time. His encrypted satellite phone rang. "It's Marcus." The private investigator's voice was grim. "We need to talk." Michael stepped onto the deck, speaking quietly. "What did you find?" "Hell, Harrison, that book Emma told you about, it's just the tip of the iceberg. We're talking about an international trafficking network with connections that go all the way to Washington. Judges, senators, law enforcement officials, people who should be protecting children are instead ensuring these monsters never get caught." Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "How deep does this go?" "Deep enough that running to Colorado might not be far enough. Victor Kozlov isn't just some street-level criminal. He's got diplomatic immunity through a shell company that provides cultural exchange services between Eastern Europe and the United States. The man is essentially untouchable through normal legal channels." As Marcus continued detailing the scope of the conspiracy they'd stumbled into, Michael watched Emma through the window. She was talking to her stuffed rabbit, probably telling it about their day, about having her own room, about being safe. For the first time since Katie's death, Michael had something worth fighting for, and he was beginning to realize that fighting meant he might have to become someone darker than he'd ever imagined. 3 days of mountain peace shattered with Marcus Stone's arrival at dawn. The private investigator looked like he hadn't slept in a week. Hollow-eyed, stubbled, carrying a briefcase that seemed to weigh more than it should. Emma was still asleep, exhausted from their first real day of safety in longer than she could remember. "Coffee first," Marcus said without preamble, settling at Michael's kitchen table. "Then I'm going to tell you things that will make you wish you'd never found that little girl." Michael poured 2 cups of black coffee, his hands steadier than he felt. "Try me." Marcus opened his briefcase and spread out photographs, documents, and what looked like surveillance reports. Victor Kozlov, runs what they call the Exchange, a high-end trafficking operation that caters to wealthy clients worldwide. We're not talking about street-level criminals here, Michael. These are billionaires, politicians, celebrities, people who can afford to pay premium prices for specific requirements. The photographs made Michael's stomach turn. Children of all ages, all ethnicities, catalogued like merchandise. Emma's face wasn't among them, but dozens of others were, kids who looked just as innocent, just as terrified. Emma wasn't just a random victim, Marcus continued. A parent's accident. It wasn't an accident. David and Sarah Williams were investigative journalists working on a story about missing children in the Midwest. They got too close to something big. Michael's blood turned to ice. You're saying they were murdered? Cars' brake lines were cut. Professional job made to look accidental. Ray Carlisle, Emma's so-called uncle, he's not even related. He's a recruiter paid to take custody of children from tragic circumstances and groom them for the Exchange. Jesus Christ. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. There's more. The police detective who called you, Sarah Martinez. She's clean, but her partner, Detective Rick Morrison, is on Victor's payroll. He's been feeding them information about the investigation, which is why they found you so quickly. Marcus pulled out another document. Patricia Chen, your secretary. She didn't make it to Miami. Michael's world stopped. What do you mean? They grabbed her at O'Hare Airport. Security footage shows two men in TSA uniforms escorting her away from her gate. No record of any security issue. No official report filed. She's leverage now, Michael. They have her, and they're going to use her to get to you. The coffee cup slipped from Michael's hand, shattering on the stone floor. Patricia, loyal, maternal Patricia, who had been protecting him for 20 years, was now a prisoner because of his decision to save Emma. There's something else, Marcus said quietly. The network has a clean-up protocol. When operations are compromised, they eliminate all evidence. Every child in their current inventory, every witness who could testify, they're planning to activate it in 72 hours. Michael looked toward the bedroom where Emma slept peacefully, probably dreaming of having her own room and being safe. How many children? Based on what I've been able to piece together. At least 40 currently in various stages of the pipeline, some as young as 5. Where? Multiple locations, warehouses, safe houses, even some in plain sight, group homes and foster facilities they've infiltrated. But here's the thing, Michael. Victor isn't going to just disappear into the shadows and start over somewhere else. Emma saw too much, knows too much, and now that you've involved yourself, you're both loose ends that need to be tied off permanently. Through the window, Michael could see the sun rising over the lake, painting the sky in shades of hope and promise. But all he felt was the crushing weight of impossible choices. What are you saying, Marcus? I'm saying running isn't enough anymore. They'll never stop hunting you, and 40 innocent children are going to die in 3 days, unless someone does something. Marcus leaned forward, his voice deadly serious. You wanted to save one little girl. Now you have the chance to save them all. But it's going to cost you everything, and there's no guarantee either of you will survive what comes next. Emma appeared in the doorway, rubbing sleep from her eyes, her blonde hair tousled and her rabbit tucked under one arm. Michael, I heard voices. Is everything okay? Michael looked at this precious child who had already lost everything once, then at the photos of dozens of other children counting on someone, anyone, to care enough to fight for them. Everything's going to be fine, sweetheart, he said, though he knew he was probably lying. Why don't you go get dressed? We need to have a very important talk. Emma sat cross-legged on the living room floor, her stuffed rabbit in her lap, listening with the gravity of someone far older than 7, as Michael and Marcus explained as much as they could without terrifying her completely. Her blue eyes grew wider with each revelation, but she didn't cry, didn't panic. This child had already survived more than most adults ever would. "So my mommy and daddy didn't die in an accident," she said quietly. "Someone hurt them because they were trying to help kids like me." Michael knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "That's right, sweetheart. They were very brave, just like you. And Uncle Ray isn't really my uncle. He's one of the bad men." "Yes," Emma nodded solemnly, processing information that would have shattered most children. "And now Victor has Miss Patricia, and he wants to hurt other kids too. We're not going to let that happen," Michael said with fierce conviction. But even as he spoke, Jim Crawford burst through the cabin door, his military bearing tense with alarm. "We've got company. 3 vehicles, coming up the access road. They found us." Through the window, Michael could see black SUVs winding their way up the mountain road, moving with the deliberate precision of a coordinated assault team. His satellite phone rang, displaying Victor's now familiar block number. "Mr. Harrison," Victor's cultured voice was almost pleasant. "I do hope you've enjoyed your brief vacation in the mountains. The scenery is quite spectacular, though I imagine you haven't had much time for sightseeing. What do you want, Victor?" "The same thing I've wanted all along. The child, unharmed, delivered to my associates. In exchange, I'll return your secretary, mostly unharmed, and you can go back to your comfortable life of quarterly reports and board meetings." Michael watched the SUVs getting closer, calculating distances and escape routes with the part of his mind trained in corporate strategy. "And if I refuse, then everyone dies. The child, your secretary, you, even that impressive former Marine you have protecting you. My men are quite thorough, Mr. Harrison. They've had extensive experience in making problems disappear permanently." Emma tugged on Michael's sleeve. When he looked down, she mouthed words that made his blood freeze. "There are more." She pointed toward the lake, where Michael could now see men in tactical gear emerging from the tree line. They'd been surrounded while he was on the phone, trapped like animals in a carefully planned hunt. "You have 5 minutes to decide," Victor continued. "Bring the child outside, hands visible, no weapons. Your security man drops his firearm and steps away. Simple business transaction. And then what? You just disappear and leave us alone?" Victor's laugh was like broken glass. "Oh, Mr. Harrison, you still don't understand the situation. You've seen too much, know too much. The moment you decided to play hero, you signed everyone's death warrant. I'm simply offering you the courtesy of choosing the order." Jim appeared at Michael's shoulder, speaking quietly. "I count at least a dozen men, military precision, professional equipment. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they're in position for a full assault." Emma stood up, clutching her rabbit, and walked toward the door with heartbreaking dignity. "I should go with them. It's me they want, and I don't want anyone else to get hurt because of me." "No," Michael said, the word exploding from him with volcanic force. "Absolutely not." "But Miss Patricia—" "We'll be fine. We're going to save her and every other child Victor has stolen." Michael pulled Emma close, feeling her small heart beating against his chest, like a trapped bird. "I promise you, sweetheart, no one is taking you anywhere." Through the window, he could see the tactical team moving into final positions. In 60 seconds, this peaceful cabin would become a war zone, and the odds were overwhelmingly against them. But as Michael looked at Emma's trusting face, at Marcus's grim determination, at Jim's military readiness, he realized something that Victor had miscalculated in all his careful planning. Some things were worth dying for. And some people, when pushed to the absolute limit, discovered they were capable of far more than anyone, including themselves, had ever imagined. "Jim," Michael said quietly, "remember when you told me you owed me your daughter's life? Sir, I'm calling in that debt, all of it." The ex-Marine's smile was sharp as a blade. "Been waiting for you to say that, boss. What do you need?" Outside, Victor's men were closing in, but inside the cabin, 3 adults and 1 incredibly brave little girl were about to teach them that sometimes the hunter becomes the hunted. The explosion came from the lake, not the forest. Jim Crawford's military experience had prepared him for tactical assaults, but not for the speedboat that emerged from the morning mist like a ghost ship, its occupants firing military-grade weapons with deadly precision. Victor's ground team scattered as their carefully planned ambush dissolved into chaos. "Move!" Jim shouted, grabbing Emma while Michael snatched his laptop and Marcus's briefcase of evidence. They ran toward the cabin's back exit, a concealed door that led to a root cellar Michael had never thought he'd need. But as they reached the door, Patricia Chen stepped out of the shadows, alive, unharmed, and pointing a gun directly at Emma's head. "I'm sorry, Michael," she said, her voice heavy with 20 years of regret. "I'm so very sorry." Michael's world tilted on its axis. "Patricia, what? Put the child down and step away from her. All of you." Her hand was steady despite the tears streaming down her face. "Victor's people aren't the only ones who've been watching you. This operation has been 20 years in the making." Jim slowly lowered Emma to the ground, his eyes never leaving Patricia's weapon. "Ma'am, you don't want to do this." "You're wrong," Patricia whispered. "This is exactly what I have to do. What I've always had to do." Marcus, still clutching his briefcase, spoke carefully. "You're not Victor's prisoner. You're his partner." "Not partner, employee, long-term, deep-cover employee." Patricia's voice cracked with emotion. "Do you think it was coincidence that your sister Katie was at that intersection when the drunk driver ran the red light, Michael? Do you think it was random chance that brought you to Harrison Industries at exactly the right time to build the kind of empire that would be useful to people like Victor?" Michael felt the ground disappearing beneath his feet. Katie's accident was carefully orchestrated. The drunk driver was paid $50,000 and given enough alcohol to ensure he wouldn't remember the details. Katie was supposed to be a clean kill, psychological trauma, to shape you into the kind of man who would avoid personal attachments for the rest of his life. Patricia wiped her eyes with her free hand. But she survived 6 days. 6 days where she might have remembered something, said something. So they finished the job with an air bubble injected into her IV line. The revelation hit Michael like a physical blow. Katie hadn't died from her injuries. She'd been murdered while he held her hand, while he promised her everything would be okay, while he'd been planning their future together. "You killed my sister." "I killed your sister," Patricia confirmed, her voice breaking completely. "On direct orders from people who needed you, shaped into someone who would build wealth and power but never risk it for emotional attachments. Someone who could be controlled, manipulated, used." Emma stepped closer to Michael, her small hand finding his. "She's lying," the little girl said with absolute certainty. "She's just trying to hurt you." "No, sweetheart, she's telling the truth." Patricia's smile was heartbroken. "And the beautiful irony is that all of our careful planning, all those years of keeping Michael isolated and emotionally unavailable, fell apart the moment he found you behind that couch. Love is the one thing we never could control." The gunfire from outside was getting closer. Victor's cleanup protocol was in full effect, and everyone in the cabin, whether ally or enemy, was now a liability to be eliminated. "Why are you telling me this?" Michael's voice was raw with grief and rage. "Because they're going to kill all of us anyway. Victor's orders have changed. No witnesses, no evidence, no loose ends. The little girl was supposed to be delivered alive, but now we're all just problems to be solved permanently." Patricia lowered her weapon slightly. "I've spent 20 years destroying everything good in your life, Michael. Maybe I can spend my last few minutes giving you a chance to save hers." Through the cabin's windows, they could see armed figures moving through the smoke and chaos outside. The final assault was beginning. "There's a tunnel," Patricia said rapidly. "Built during Prohibition, connects the root cellar to a cave system about half a mile east. Maps are in the kitchen drawer. If you can reach the caves, you might make it to the ranger station. What about you?" Patricia checked her weapon with professional efficiency. "I'm going to buy you as much time as I can. It's not redemption, Michael. Nothing can balance the scales for what I've done, but maybe it's enough to matter." Emma walked over to Patricia, looking up at her with those impossibly wise blue eyes. "I forgive you," she said simply. "My mommy told me that forgiveness isn't about the person who hurt you. It's about not carrying their poison in your own heart." Patricia knelt down to Emma's level, fresh tears streaming. "You're going to grow up to be something extraordinary, little one. Don't let them steal that light from you." The cabin's front windows exploded inward as Victor's assault team breached the building. Patricia stood up, raised her weapon toward the approaching figures, and looked back at Michael one last time. "Run!" The tunnel was a nightmare of cobwebs, stagnant air, and absolute darkness that pressed against them like a living thing. Emma's small hand gripped Michael's with desperate strength as they navigated by flashlight, Jim leading with military precision, while Marcus brought up the rear, his briefcase of evidence clutched like a lifeline. Behind them, the sounds of gunfire had stopped. Either Patricia had succeeded in delaying Victor's men, or she was dead. Michael tried not to think about which was more likely. "How much further?" Emma whispered, her voice echoing strangely in the confined space. "According to Patricia's map, maybe quarter-mile to the cave system," Jim replied, his flashlight beam revealing rough-hewn walls that looked like they hadn't been disturbed in decades. "From there, it's another half-mile to the ranger station." "If the map is accurate," Marcus added grimly, "if Patricia was telling the truth about the tunnel, if Victor's people don't know about it." Michael wanted to snap at the investigators' pessimism, but he couldn't. Everything they'd believed about their situation had been shattered in the last hour. Patricia, his trusted guardian angel for 20 years, had been Victor's agent. Katie's death hadn't been a tragic accident, but calculated murder. His entire adult life had been shaped by forces he'd never suspected existed. And somewhere behind them in the darkness, professional killers were hunting a 7-year-old girl whose only crime was being inconveniently brave. They reached the cave system as Jim's flashlight began to dim. Natural rock formations opened up around them, creating cathedral-like spaces filled with strange shadows and the sound of dripping water. Emma's eyes reflected their lights like a cat's, wide with wonder despite their desperate circumstances. "It's like a fairy tale underground kingdom," she whispered. "Stay close, sweetheart," Michael said, though he found her sense of wonder oddly comforting. Even running for her life, Emma could still find beauty in the world. Marcus's satellite phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "It's my contact at the FBI," he said, scanning the text rapidly. "Jesus Christ! What now?" "Victor's cleanup protocol just went active. They're moving on all the facilities simultaneously, warehouses, safe houses, foster homes, everywhere they've been holding children." Marcus looked up, his face grim in the flashlight's glow. 43 children, Michael. They're killing 43 children to eliminate evidence. The number hit Michael like a physical blow. 43 Emmas, all facing death because one little girl had been brave enough to run and one businessman had been foolish enough to care. "Not if we can stop it," Jim said with military conviction. "How long do we have?" "My contact estimates maybe 2 hours before they finish the job and disappear across international borders. They've got diplomatic immunity, private jets, and safe houses in countries without extradition treaties." Emma tugged on Michael's sleeve. "Can we save them?" Michael knelt down to her level, seeing his own face reflected in her trusting eyes. 3 days ago, he'd been Michael Harrison, billionaire CEO, master of his controlled corporate universe. Now he was a fugitive in a cave, responsible for the lives of dozens of children he'd never met, armed with nothing but determination and whatever resources he could rally in the next 2 hours. "I don't know, sweetheart, but we're going to try." "Good," Emma said with simple finality. "My mommy and daddy tried to save kids like this. Maybe that's why you found me. Maybe I'm supposed to help you save them too." Through a gap in the cave ceiling, Michael could see the first light of dawn painting the sky. Somewhere above them, Victor's people were probably searching the burned cabin, wondering where their targets had vanished. They had maybe an hour before the hunt resumed with full intensity. "Jim, how many people do you still trust? People who would follow you into hell without asking questions?" The ex-Marine smiled grimly. "Enough. My old unit, some private contractors, a few FBI agents who aren't on anyone's payroll. But Michael, what you're talking about, simultaneous assaults on multiple fortified positions, that's not a business operation. That's a war." Michael stood up, decision crystallizing in his mind with absolute clarity. For 20 years, he'd avoided personal attachments, emotional risks, anything that might make him vulnerable. Patricia and Victor had shaped him into exactly what they needed, a man too careful to be a hero. But Emma had changed everything, and now 43 children were counting on someone, anyone, to care enough to fight. "Then we start a war," Michael said quietly. "We end this today, one way or another. Or—" In his pocket, his encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming call from Victor. The final negotiation was about to begin, and this time, Michael Harrison was ready to play for keeps. Victor's call came as they emerged from the cave system into the pale morning light. Michael answered on the first ring, Emma's small hand still gripped firmly in his. "Mr. Harrison, I must admit your resourcefulness continues to impress me. Patricia always said you were more dangerous than you appeared. Where is she?" "Patricia Chen died approximately 1 hour ago, killed while attempting to delay my security team. Her final act of defiance, I suppose, almost romantic, if you appreciate tragedy." Victor's voice carried casual cruelty. "But we have more pressing matters to discuss." Through Marcus's satellite connection, Michael could see real-time updates from Jim's hastily assembled strike teams. 12 locations across 3 states, each holding children destined for horror beyond imagination. Former Marines, FBI agents who'd gone rogue, private security contractors who owed Jim their lives, all converging simultaneously on Victor's network. "I want to make you an offer," Victor continued. "Call off whatever military operation you're attempting to coordinate. Surrender yourself and the child to my associates at the coordinates I'm about to send. In exchange, I'll allow 30 of the 43 children to live. 13 children die. The cost of your interference. A businessman like yourself understands overhead expenses." Emma looked up at Michael, her blue eyes reflecting wisdom far beyond her 7 years. "Don't do it," she whispered. "My mommy and daddy died trying to save kids like this. We can't let their sacrifice be for nothing." Michael's encrypted tablet showed tactical updates. Team Alpha approaching Warehouse 7. Team Bravo in position at Foster Facility Delta. Team Charlie encountering heavy resistance. "Victor, I have a counter-offer." "I'm listening." 43 children go free. You surrender to federal authorities. Your entire network gets dismantled. In exchange, I don't release the evidence that will destroy everyone who's protected you for the past 2 decades. Victor's laugh was genuinely amused. "What evidence?" Patricia's 20 years of loyal service ensured that no permanent records existed. Every document, every photograph, every piece of testimony, all carefully managed or eliminated. Marcus held up his briefcase with a grim smile, speaking loudly enough for Victor to hear. "Not all of it. Emma's parents weren't just investigative journalists, Victor. They were FBI consultants building a federal case. Before they died, they uploaded everything to a secure server with deadman switches. Patricia never knew it existed. The silence on the phone stretched for long seconds. "You're bluffing." Senator Morrison of Illinois, Judge Catherine Wells in Chicago, Detective Rick Morrison, your inside man, FBI Deputy Director Thomas Crawford, all documented, all with financial records, photographs, recorded conversations. Marcus opened the briefcase, revealing drives, documents, recordings. 20 years of evidence, Victor, every transaction, every child, every murder. Through his tactical display, Michael watched his teams breach the final locations simultaneously. Children were being led to safety, dozens of them blinking in sunlight they hadn't seen in weeks or months. Emma squeezed his hand as each status report came in. Warehouse 7 secured, 8 children safe. Foster facility Delta cleared, 12 children recovered. But Victor had one final card to play. "Very impressive, Mr. Harrison. However, I have something you want more than justice." The sound of helicopter rotors filled the phone connection. "I have Patricia Chen's daughter." Michael's world stopped. Patricia doesn't have a daughter. Patricia Chen has had a daughter for 8 years. A beautiful little girl named Sophie, currently attending private school in Switzerland, under an assumed identity. The child believes her mother works for an international consulting firm and travels frequently. She has no idea her tuition and living expenses are paid for by my organization. The cruelty was breathtaking. Patricia had been trapped for 20 years, not by greed or blackmail, but by love for a child she could never acknowledge. One final exchange, Mr. Harrison. You're Emma for my Sophie. Both children deserve to live, don't you think? But I can only guarantee the safety of one. Emma let go of Michael's hand and walked toward his phone with heartbreaking dignity. "Mr. Victor," she said in her clear, brave voice, "my name is Emma Williams. My mummy and daddy were David and Sarah Williams, and they died trying to stop people like you. Hello, little Emma. You've caused quite a lot of trouble." "Good. And I want to tell you something important." Emma's voice grew stronger. "Mr. Michael isn't going to trade me for anybody, because that's not who he is. And you're not going to hurt any more children, because we're not going to let you." Such brave words from such a small girl. "I'm not small," Emma said with absolute conviction. "I'm exactly the right size to be brave, and so is Sophie, and so are all the other kids you tried to hurt." Michael's tablet showed the final status update. All facilities secured, 43 children safe, Victor Kozlov's helicopter tracked by satellite, intercepted by Air National Guard. Victor's voice came through the phone one last time, strain finally showing. "This isn't over, Harrison. You have no idea how deep this network runs, how many powerful people depend on its services." "Maybe," Michael replied, watching Emma's proud smile. "But today, 43 children are going home. Today you lost. And sometimes, Victor, today is enough." The phone went dead. Hours later, news reports would detail the largest human trafficking bust in U.S. history. Trials would drag on for years, bringing down judges, politicians, and business leaders. Some would escape justice, disappearing into international shadows, but their network was shattered beyond repair. But that evening, as Michael and Emma sat on his cabin's dock watching the sunset paint the lake in shades of gold and hope, none of that mattered as much as one simple truth. Sometimes love was stronger than fear, and sometimes one person's decision to care could change everything. "Michael," Emma said, leaning against his shoulder. "Yes, sweetheart? Are we family now?" Michael looked at this extraordinary little girl who had taught him that running toward danger was sometimes the only way to find safety, that opening your heart was worth any risk. "If you want to be." Emma smiled, the same radiant smile, that had been lighting up his world for 6 days that felt like a lifetime. I want to be. As darkness fell over the Colorado mountains, 43 families were reunited with children they'd thought they'd lost forever. Patricia Chen's daughter Sophie was safe in federal custody, finally learning the truth about her mother's sacrifice. And Viktor Kozlov sat in a maximum security prison cell, his empire of shadows destroyed by the love between a broken businessman and a brave little girl who had refused to let the darkness win. Some heroes wear capes. Others wear expensive suits and learn that the greatest power in the universe isn't money or influence. It's the courage to love someone more than you fear losing them.